Drunk on Broad, Beer Battered Sports, and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions.
E-A-G-L-E-S Eagles!
Swinging a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup for the lead. Yes!
Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Oh, good morning. Well, Eric, we're sitting here. We're drunk on the Phils, but we're sitting here. How many days away from opening day? Not that many. It's
I think it's 11 now.
11 days on
Today's what, the 16th? Yeah.
at 4:05 on the 27th of March. We'll have actual. We'll be back. I've slowly started to progressively pull all the Phillies stuff back out and into the rotation. I was talking with Mark yesterday. The Eagles Super Bowl stuff still feels really good to put on. I got to give a shout out to Joe. Joe had his Super Bowl hat embroidered. Took it to Lids and got the BTA and then the score embroidered on the side. I was like, oh, that's might
cool.
be something to add to the collection. But everything from spring training has been like, I'm gonna be honest, knock on wood, no news is good news. With everybody's staying healthy. You're getting to see different guys in different spots, different locations. Do me a favor, you were down there. Give me the kind of rundown of kind of what you saw while you were down there.
Yeah, it's a really cool complex to have down there. I mean, the game is a big part of it, obviously, but one of my favorite things that we did down there was going over to the Carpenter Complex and watching some of the workouts. We got over there earlier on Saturday. Got to see a bunch of the relievers doing some fielding drills and everything. Got to see Strom, Alvarado, Kirkring, Joe Ross, those types of guys. And then on the other fields, it's all minor league stuff basically. So got to see some catching drills. We got to see Aiden Miller taking some BP, so that was pretty awesome.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, there's you could spend an entire day there. I mean, you get there like 9:30, start seeing the guys come out for workouts and everything, watch some workouts. Then head over to the stadium, watch the game, hang out at Frenchie's a little bit afterwards if you're so inclined.
Nice.
But yeah, it's such a fun time. Luckily, weather was great. Got to see two good games. So they kind of went on a winning streak they started the winning streak right before we got there. And since then, the offense has been putting up some numbers.
Nice. And there's a couple of things that you touched on that I want to one, I want to talk about Alvarado. Two, I want to talk about the futures game, what are they calling that? The breakout. I love that. I would love that, to continue and maybe try to expand on that. That would be cool to kind of see. I know they've got kind of everybody on reserve, but it would be cool to see a little tournament of that, to see, even if it's a single game elimination, to see them kind of, you get the opportunity to maybe, put your best and brightest and highlight it a little bit. I really wish it was a little bit more accessible. It's not nearly as accessible as you would think. You really, if you wanted to watch it, you really had to go searching to find it. Talk about Alvarado. Right, because Alvarado in the spring looks to kind of be rounded into form back into the Alvarado that we've seen. Right, the last I saw, he's pitched a total of 6 innings, but 15 strikeouts, no earned runs, and clocking fastballs up in north of 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, he looks great right now. The velocity obviously is a big part of it, but he also he just looks like he's more in shape too. But yeah, he's been absolutely dominant this spring, and I think that's such a big thing because obviously losing um, Hoffman, you kind of have to. They brought in Romano, obviously, and I think they're relying on Kirkering to kind of take a big step too. But having Alvarado back in Alvarado form is huge. I think I saw his whip is like what a point or a 0.83 or something like that.
Yeah.
And the thing with him is like if his command's there and he's not giving up walks like that, look out, especially when he's pumping 101, 102 semi consistently.
Yeah.
They need that.
Yeah, and I think that to be able to have, you're going to have really good options at the back end of the bullpen. Talk to me about how you see that progress through. Obviously they're going to kind of work out the kinks throughout the season, and again, we have to remember it's a really long season. But how do you see them kind of handling the back end of the bullpen?
I think to start off, Thompson will never say that this guy's my closer. He just doesn't operate that way. But I think I think they're probably going to try Jordan Romano in the ninth, the beginning, and then have some variation of Kirkering, depending on matchups. Kirkering, Alvarado, potentially Strom. He had a really good season last year. I know he's got the shoulder thing right now, but it sounds like he's kind of trending in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Some combination of those guys in the seventh and eighth. But then you have guys like I trust some of the middle inning guys too. Like Jose Ruiz was a great story from last year who kind of came out of nowhere and held his own. I don't want him necessarily pitching in the eighth or ninth, but if you need him in the sixth or get a couple outs in the seventh inning, I wouldn't have a problem pitching him there either. So I kind of like the way the bullpen's shaping out. I was a little nervous after losing Hoffman and Estevez, but if Alvarado can bounce back, if Kirkering can keep taking another step forward, because he was good last year. Like I feel like everyone's kind of saying like, oh wow, like we're relying on Kirkering too much here. I'm like, he was good last year in his first season, and it looks like he's taken that next step. So I kind of like our at least our back three, back four there to give you some versatility, and I trust those guys.
Yeah, I think the fact that you have two left-handed options and you have two right-handed options, the optionality in the back end really does give you, it gives you the perspective that like if you need to give a guy a night's rest, that like you're going to be able to match up based on whatever part of the lineup you're going to see. But the fact that you've got Jordan Romano and Kirkering from the right, you've got Alvarado and Strom from the left, but then you also have guys like Tanner Banks, right? Tanner Banks is a guy that, can be in that sixth, seventh, eighth, he can play a role in there. Right. And Joe Ross is another guy, right? Joe Ross is another guy that, can come in and eat innings for you.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that puts my brain in a pretzel is Taijuan Walker, man. Like, I don't know what you do with him, if you do anything with him. That it is his role. Just is he the by nine guy, right? Up by nine, down by nine.
It's really interesting because he's pitched pretty well this spring, actually. And they have kind of good things to say about him. I was definitely skeptical in the beginning, because they were talking about, his velocity is back up. I mean, when his velocity was back up, it was sitting like 88, 89 this time last spring. And now he's up to like 92, 93. So he's not like blowing the ball by anyone. But if he can locate, the best thing that could happen right now is he continues to pitch well this spring. There's already a lot of injuries taking place across baseball. Maybe another team needs that fifth starter. And
that was going to be my next question. Like,
yeah,
he seems like a guy that like you obviously have a surplus. You and I have talked about the fact that like starting pitching is at a premium in the league, and when you have, he's at the very, very least, at the bare minimum, he is a guy that will eat innings. So anything that you could get back for him is a bonus.
The biggest thing is just salary. I mean, honestly, if you can have another team take on his salary and you get a couple mid-level prospects or a mid-level prospect in return, like Do it.
Eric, a bag of balls would do at this point. If you can get someone else to take that salary and take that off your books, man, I don't think you could ask for more. Now, in
No.
terms of when you look at the starting rotation, right? The way that you're going to line this up, how do you think they line it up from 1 to 5?
So it's interesting because originally I was thinking they'd slot. Wheeler's going to get opening day. He'll be your number one.
Mm-hmm.
No, they have to. We're such a lefty heavy rotation. You got to split up Wheeler and Nola. So Nola, I think, goes 3. I thought they were going to do Sanchez maybe 2, but the way it was lining up, it looks like Luzardo might be going after Wheeler. So
Mm-hmm.
might be Luzardo 2, Nola 3, Sanchez 4, and Suarez 5. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because I know Thompson was saying he kind of wanted to split up Luzardo and Sanchez because they're kind of similar. They have a little bit of that they're a little harder throwing than Suarez, so splitting those guys up I think is good. You probably don't want to put those guys right next to each other in the same series.
And I also think about where that could line up when the rotation turns around again, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a team to have to face Ranger Suarez, who can be very I'll say very deliberate in his delivery, to then the next night have to face Zach Wheeler, it is also a good kind of 1-2 when you start to turn the starting pitching around.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I mean, almost like the fact that we're talking range, like in my mind, I'm thinking like, just because of how he finished last year. But like the fact that I'm thinking like Ranger Suarez is our worst starter right now, and I say I put worse in quotation marks here because
He's
he's
your number
not a
5.
bad pitcher at all. It's like just getting Luzardo, what that did to upgrade this rotation. Like the fact that I remember last year over the summer when it would be the mixtures of the fifth starter was Taijuan Walker, Tyler Phillips had that one really good game and then was awful after that. Colby Allard, these guys were. It was like you could basically chalk it up as a loss every single time.
You could not find a warm body.
No,
in that fifth spot. They went through. If we went back and looked, they probably went through 5, 6, 7 guys in that one slot. And you're right in saying like those were scheduled losses every fifth day.
Were. Yep. And
what do you think happened?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, what do you think happens with Andrew Painter when Andrew Painter comes in?
The nice thing is they can take their time with him, right? Because with having those 5 guys already, you're not really in a rush. So to me, keep doing what you're doing. Like he just threw his first live BP, I think. What was it, Thursday, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it was Thursday. And so like they're obviously taking it very slow with him as they should. So I think I'm guessing they'll keep him down in Clearwater for a couple of weeks after the season still. And then assign him to either Reading or Lehigh Valley, let him build up, have him start, pitch an inning or 2 for a couple starts in a row, then eventually ramp him up to, 4, basically then just do like your spring training regiment with your other starters like you do with him and get him up here by July or August. Because eventually, I hate to say it, but injuries happen. And, as much as I'd love to see our 1 through 5 starters all, pitch 180, 200 innings, it's just so unlikely that happens. So we're going to need him at some point. But also they talked about the idea of, working maybe in August or September with a 6-man rotation for a little bit, just to limit some of the innings with some of these guys for a potential postseason run. So there's a lot of options and a lot of flexibility. And I think having made that trade for Luzardo gives you that flexibility because now you're not like, oh, we need Painter to come up in a playoff race because we can't get anyone else that can pitch more than 2 innings without giving up 8 runs. So they definitely have the flexibility there now.
Yeah, no, I look at that and I go, the options are there, right? You're going to have your choice of what you really want to do with him based on what the scenario is. But I think the fact that you get that on the horizon, that's it just screams it's a very Braves like scenario, right? Wait for your number 1 prospect to be ready, bring them up at the the mid to late summer, and let him just kind of cook in terms of you're going to put him in a spot where he's going to be the 5 or the 6. He's not going to be at the top of your rotation. And I like the fact that he's going to be around Wheeler, and he's going to be around a lot of savvy veterans, which for a young guy can only be helpful. I can only imagine that's a scenario where, and then when you get to the playoffs, right? He's a guy that you can bring in a pinch. You can bring him in to get a couple outs late in games, maybe high pressure situations, depending on how how his kind of play on the field pans out.
Yeah, he and obviously his first year, I think they could use him more in a versatile role like that. But it's just his delivery is just so smooth for how hard he throws. Like I really can't wait to see him come up and make his debut because he is going to be a really fun pitcher. We've talked about this before too, where like prospects are always like so hit or miss, but it just seems the general consensus around the league is that like Painter is going to be not just good, but he is going to be like a top starter in this league. So I really can't wait. I hate that he had to have that Tommy John and basically miss a year of development. I mean, he's still so young though. I think he's still only 21. So I mean, there's still plenty of time here. But man, I can't wait.
Yeah, and his size doesn't hurt either, right?
No.
6'7", 215.
Yep.
It is weird, Eric, to see now that I'm getting older, right? To see guys that are playing professionally that like they're born in 2003.
Yeah.
That just
it's
that's
crazy.
just a little it is a little crazy. But talk to me about catching, right? Because you got Real Muto in he's got his contract scenario that's going to play out. The conversation really in spring training is about the backup. Talk to me about where you are in terms of Garrett Stubbs and Rafael Marchand.
I think just from like a business and like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a business standpoint, I think you almost have to use Marchand because he doesn't have any options left. So if you don't bring him up, then someone's going to take it. I know he's had issues staying healthy, but there's going to be a team out there that's going to go after him. I like Stubbs. I think he's a really good defensive catcher, and I think like he gets a lot of crap for his offense, but it's also so hard to back up JT because he plays so much. So like Stubbs just doesn't get the at bats, right? I mean, you can't get three or four at bats every 7 days and expect to hit 300. So I think Stubbs has the option, so it makes sense to kind of keep him in the organization for depth. But I think it makes sense to at least try Marchand as the backup, just because you're probably going to lose him if you don't.
Yeah. How do you think that this thing with Real Muto plays out? Right, because his contract, he's 34. You can see that last year. I won't say, but it wasn't bad, but it was definitely declining. It's not what it used to be. He's still in the top third in terms of catchers in the league, but as a 35-year-old free agent, how do you think that this contract scenario plays out?
I think it's really tough because you're right. I mean, catchers, I think out of all positions in baseball, catchers age the worst just because the wear and tear. So I really don't want to give, a long contract to a guy who, like, I mean, you think even if you give him a 2-year deal, he's going to be 37 by the end of it. And you kind of already see some of the, I don't want to say a decline, but like it's catching up to him. He's still like one of the, probably a top 10 catcher in baseball offensively, and probably still top 5 defensively. He handles the pitching staff really well. So there's a lot of like intangibles and value that he holds there. But, and the sentimentality of, okay, he's been part of this core now for so long is obviously there too. But it's like, it's really tough for me to go out and give him anything more than, I think he'd probably not take anything less than a 3-year deal. But that even seems long to me. And he's not going to take like a pay cut necessarily. I don't think he's going to necessarily in line for a raise, but you're probably thinking around $20 million a year for a guy who's going to be 36, 37, 38 by the time that contract's over. The issue is minor league catching depth, like we don't have a ton there who's like ready to come up. So you have Eduardo Tait, who's still only 19, who's been, everyone keeps talking about him, keeps rising up the prospect rankings, but he's not anywhere close to being ready. So the options basically are you sign JT, and just eat up some of that money, or you look for like a 1 or 2 year stopgap type guy in free agency who maybe costs a little bit less, but then you're downgrading the position. So it's I think that's the hardest decision they're gonna have to make this offseason.
I mean, it could play out in like a 1-to-1, right? Like you go 1 year at a time. Because I'm pulling up the 2026 catching free agent class, and there's one guy under 30.
Wow.
Like William Contreras is 28. That's your under 30 class.
And he's going to
everybody else is north of 30.
Yeah.
Like obviously Real Muto is at the high end of that in terms of salary. But like you're looking at Real Muto, Salvador Perez. You're looking at like a guy like Danny Jansen, like you're like Austin Hedges in Cleveland. Jacob Stallings is a guy who we've seen in Miami and now Colorado. Austin Barnes, like it's not that's the other thing I look at, right? It's not a stellar free agent class. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if there's an offseason, like if they choose not to extend him, that there's a trade to be made for a guy that's not on this list. But I'm curious to see how that situation plays out because it's not the options are not great.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's such a tough decision because he's still going to be good for a couple more years, right? I still think he's got a couple more years in the tank. It's just like, how many guys are we going to have on like those, back end contracts that it's just like, all right, we gave them a lot of years, and then how are they going to be at the end of that? So it's really tough. I mean, I think in terms of like free agency, he's out of all of the three that are potentially leaving, I think he's the most difficult one to figure out.
It really is. It really is frustrating in terms of like, there's not a whole lot of movement on the infield, right? You're pretty stuck with the guys that you have in place in terms of like Bohm and Turner, Stott and Harper. Talk to me about the outfield, right? Because you're going to have this is where you could see a variety of combinations of guys.
Yeah, it's definitely, I guess, probably the biggest question mark on the team right now is just outfield production. Kepler's looked really good in the spring, but we know that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I never hated the Kepler signing for a one year deal. I think he has some potential. Like when he's healthy, I think he'll be a good player.
I mean, in terms of that, I don't mind it. You took a swing on a guy that has the potential for some upside, but they were always going to make moves on the fringes of this roster.
Right, going into this offseason, I mean, there's a lot of talk about which big free agent should we bring in. That was all a pipe dream, right? I mean, you can't keep committing to these huge contracts without hurting yourself down the road. So, I think I think bringing in Kepler was a pretty, they had to do something with the outfield, right? You couldn't go in with the same situation you had last year. But yeah, they have guys who can play. Yeah, they have guys who can play. I like having the idea of not having to worry about starting Marsh and Rojas at the same time, but being able to kind of more platoon them in that situation, because Marsh has looked pretty good this spring too. I know Rojas had the shoulder thing from the Dominican League,
right?
So he hasn't really played a ton of the field, but you know what you're getting from him defensively.
Right.
And then Cassie's gonna, he's gonna play. Like, I mean, he played all 162 last year. And there could be worse guys out there. I mean, can he be frustrating sometimes? Absolutely. But like, you think back, and this is maybe recency bias, but like last year when the rest of the lineup were floundering in September and the playoff series against the Mets, he was the only guy who was still hitting really. So he
It's very true.
yeah,
If you can say anything about it, he shows up every day. He plays every day. You can pencil him in to that spot in the lineup every
yeah.
day. And he might have frustrating at bats where he looks like he's flailing, but for the most part, throughout the course of the 162, he's pretty consistent. And
Yeah.
from that spot in the lineup, that's really all you can ask.
Yep, exactly. He does basically what you need him to do, and he plays a lot, right? So you don't have to worry about injuries necessarily as much with him. Now he's got 1 more year after this on his
Mhm.
deal. I don't see him being a guy they end up bringing back. But they also have to I feel like the outfield is still like even with those four guys who can all play a little bit. Yeah, they're still kind of lacking like that big consistent like power bat in the outfield that
Mhm.
you kind of look for from your corner outfield positions.
All right, I'm going to propose something because this is
Let's
something
hear it.
I've kind of heard from local radio, some national radio, some national stuff. The Obviously there was a lot of conversation, the interview with Bryce Harper, where Bryce Harper talks about his willingness to be able to go out to the outfield. And there's a guy that's playing first base in Toronto with a giant bat. Well, obviously, I don't think we have to talk about the fact like, would you want him? But what would be or maybe we do. What would that be a guy that obviously the package for him and the contract that you would have to give would might change the conversation a little bit. But what are your thoughts about the idea of bringing Vlad Guerrero in, moving Harper back into the outfield?
I mean, from a team building perspective, yeah, let's go.
Right.
Adding him to the lineup would be huge. Having that other power bat. The issue is he's probably going to need a contract at least north of 450 million. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
once again, like you have all these big contracts, you'll be shedding maybe a couple, but like I don't know if you're shedding enough to bring in another contract like that, especially because he's going to get a really long deal too. So we're going to be looking at the 30, 2033, 34 Phillies, and they're going to need like walkers out there because we're just going to be paying these guys $30 million a year to to not really be in their prime anymore. So I like
Eric,
it, but the way
you could always do what the Dodgers do, right?
you could defer, yeah,
You could defer an insane amount of money. You could
yep,
give him the Bobby Bonilla treatment and pay him
yep.
until 2070.
Yeah, it's not my money. So I mean, if they want to bring him in, do it. I don't care.
Right.
We could be the Dodgers. I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah.
I just see how they've treaded kind of these last couple off seasons, and I just think unless something crazy happens, I don't see them shelling out the money for it. But crazier things have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that could be, and the only reason I say that is because when I look at the AL East, right, the Red Sox got better.
Mm-hmm.
The Yankees got better. The Orioles got better. Everybody in that division is playing really, really well. And then I feel like it's like there's those three, and then you've got the Blue Jays and Rays.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rays aren't going to pay. The Rays don't pay anybody. And if the Blue Jays are stuck in a position where, by the time, that trade deadline rolls around, they're, I don't know, 20 games out in that division. And they know that Vlad has made it very clear that he wants a specific number, that he's already turned down an extension that they've already talked about. That could be, and the haul of prospects that it would take to be able to get him. What do you think that would look like?
The fact that it would be a rental might make it a little bit cheaper, but I mean, you're looking at least Crawford or Miller, if not both.
Right.
and probably a couple, maybe like a Gene Cabrera type, or Moises Chassé type pitching. Like it's going to be probably two of your top 5 prospects at least, and then maybe a couple in the that round out the in the top 20 or something. It's going to be a huge package, and to me, it's one of those things where it's like I don't see the need in future in getting rid of the future to bring in. I like the idea of a rental, especially when, like, first base, we already have Harper there, right? I would rather, if we're gonna do something like that, get someone in the outfield or some or a big reliever or something like that. Just because to me, it's not a big position of need at the point. I mean, it would help solve maybe some of the outfield issues, moving Bryce back out there. But just like the I would rather pay the money and get him in free agency than have to give up any of those prospects that I just mentioned,
Yeah,
especially
and
Aiden Miller.
yeah. I mean, and in a minute we can transition to talk about the guys that we saw in that breakout game. But like, I think that this team, the way that it's built, it kind of lines up for when those contracts are going to kind of run out, to be able to create spots for guys like Crawford and Miller, and they know that they're going to need that influx of guys that are going to be young and cheap based on where they are in terms of contracts with guys that they've already started to pay big money. So, when you look at the prospect of adding, Andrew Painter and Aiden Miller and Crawford in the next couple years, really kind of does lean me more towards where you're talking about. I would rather just figure out a way to throw an enormous pile of money at him in free agency. Just the prospect, Eric, of him playing
Oh, it would be great.
in that stadium, because we have seen him launch moonshots in Toronto.
Mhm.
I can only imagine he'd be peppering the new enormous scoreboard. It's just exciting. It's exciting
Yeah.
to think about, talk about, and and you hope that they're in a position where they're going to be able to look at what additions they can make mid-season. And I think we kind of talked about, we talked about the idea before, where they're going to be in that competitive race throughout the summer. The Braves are going to be healthier. The Mets made improvements, but they kind of made a
They all
lot
got
of
hurt.
improvement, but they're really, really top heavy.
Yeah.
And the thing that I go back to when I look at with the Juan Soto deal, especially with with his deal with the Mets, is that you saw his production in San Diego and you saw how he was able to affect the lineup, and then you saw them get better when he left. So I wonder if the same kind of thing happens if there's a little bit of a drop off because they're so reliant on Juan Soto.
Yeah, you don't really know. And like you said, their lineup is very top heavy. I think the biggest thing is going to be Mark Vientos and how he plays this year. Because if he doesn't have a year like he had last year, and what he hit like 30 home runs or something, you're really looking at that bottom part of the lineup where if it doesn't really pan out, like that could be a bad back end of the lineup there. So yeah, they might score a lot of runs in the first inning and in the third inning, but they're not going to if you don't have guys at that back end contributing. The signing of Juan Soto, and I've said this I think before on here, with baseball, it's not like the NBA where you get like a superstar and your team is then automatically a contender. In baseball, like you could have Juan Soto on, the Pirates, right? And yeah, he's the best player in baseball, but no one else around him is doing anything. You need more than just that. And their pitching staff, they signed all those guys and they all got hurt already. So
It's true.
it's kind of like, wow. No, I still think they're going to be a good team. I think they're going to be in the division race, the whole time. I think the NL East is going to be a lot of fun because it's fun to hate the Mets and Braves, and with all 3 teams kind of now being at a high caliber,
Yeah,
it's going to be it's going to be frustrating because they're both going to be good, but at the same time, it's fun to kind of have that rivalry back.
I like it. We talked about the breakout game. So in the breakout game, right? You saw a handful of the Phillies' best prospects, right? You saw the lineup with Crawford. You saw Dante Nori, who was a draft pick a couple years ago. Aiden Miller at short. Gabriel Rincons, which is a guy who's getting a lot of TV time. Atai is a guy you just talked about. Talk to me about the guys that you saw. Talk to me about the prospect pool coming up.
Yeah, I'm actually. This is probably the first time I'm like really excited for minor leagues. I didn't say first time, but like in a while.
In a while.
Yeah, it's been some time. But yeah, I mean, just even like in the spring training games, like I've been watching like the eighth and ninth inning with a lot of these guys coming in, and some of these guys are that you don't really hear of. Like every Phillies fan has heard of the Painters, the Millers, the Crawfords, right? But there's some other guys in there that are really interesting to watch. The one guy I was a little disappointed that we didn't get to see was Griffin Burkholder. I'm really curious to see what he can do. But Rincones is there, and for a while I wasn't really sure what his pedigree was going to be and like how high of a prospect he was going to be, or was he just kind of like one of those middle tier guys? But he has big league power already.
Yeah,
And some of
he's
the
got a
home
lot
runs,
of pop.
yeah. Nori is a really interesting guy. Him and Burkholder were both draft picks last year. But there was, that spring breakout game was so much fun. Like it worked out really well. I had an in service, so I was able to jet out a couple minutes early, so I was able to actually watch
Nice.
most of it. But yeah, it's just so exciting to see some of these guys coming through, and I love the idea of the breakout game. And there's so many people like that I want to see, like that Arun Escobar guy who I had not really heard of, and then I was at the game not last Sunday. Well, yeah, last Sunday when he hit that moonshot over Frenchies
Right.
against Baltimore. He also made a really nice play at second base. Like there's a lot of these guys that you kind of get to see in the spring training games and the spring breakout game that maybe aren't household names. Like the Painters and Millers, you get to see all these other guys kind of coming through, which I think makes it really exciting.
Talk to me about the pitching, right? Because you saw the obviously there are the couple of guys at the top of their prospect pool in terms of pitching. We all know those guys. Talk to me about some guys little later on in the depth pool.
Yeah, so for the last few years it was always Painter, Miller, McGarry, right? Not Painter, Miller, Painter, Abel, McGarry.
Right.
Abel has kind of dropped off. McGarry, I feel bad saying this, but he has no command out there at all. So the new guys who are exciting, Moises Chasse, who started the game and looked really good. Gene Cabrera is another one who's really exciting. He struggled with his command a little bit in that game, but he's got some good stuff there. And there's a guy who came in later in the game who I had not really known much about, but his stuff was really intriguing. Shares a last name with our current first baseman, Daniel Harper.
Okay.
No relation. He was pumping some heat up there, and looked really good in the inning that he pitched. I forget what inning he pitched, but he was an interesting guy who's not one of the guys. He's not even in our top 25 prospects, I don't think. But he looked like he had some potential there. And there was one other guy I was thinking about that was kind of a big. Andrew Baker was another relief guy name
Okay.
that was kind of up there before. He's another one. It just seems like Abel, McGarry, Baker, like their issues are command. And McGarry's really got some good stuff, but he was pitching, and I think Cole Hamels was announced that he was the color analyst for the spring breakout game, and he mentioned something. He's like, "Yeah, if he could just get his command under control," and as he's saying it, McGarry throws one to the backstop.
It's the kind of thing where it's like it really is a shame because it's like you look at a guy that's got he's got A+ potential stuff, but it legit looks like he's like all over the place.
Yeah.
And if there's the last thing that you want to do is is put him in a position where you need him to come in and at the major league level, control is everything. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can't be putting guys on, you can't be giving guys extra bases because it will inevitably come back and hurt you. But
Yep.
I don't know. It is interesting to see though that next tier of guys. And you hope that those next tier of guys can have the effect that that little bit of influx of youth and talent can sometimes be enough to like put a team over the edge. Because you're going to need it. You're going to need it based on the way that some of the teams especially in the National League are built. You don't have to look real far to see that the Dodgers are going to have. I mean, for Christ's sake, I think they've got like 9 starting pitchers that
They
they can pick
have
from.
2 rotations.
I mean, it really is wild. And come October, you're going to need production up and down your lineup. But it does bring up a lot of good conversation, leading into the season. So I'm curious to see, how when this season starts to kick off, right? You've got, they're going to start off with the 3-game series in Washington, and then they'll come home on Monday, the 31st, and start with that series against Colorado.
Yeah, I can't wait for it to start. I love watching spring training, and I liked being down there. But I'm at this point ready for the regular season to start. It's kind of nice, I think, starting off against Washington and Colorado before you have the Dodgers come into town right after that. So hopefully get a couple series wins under your belt before but before they come in. But it should be it should be interesting. And I like playing the Dodgers this early in the season. Get some of that out of the way. Although it's funny, obviously they're World Series champions last year, but the Phillies usually actually play pretty well against the Dodgers. I think they won the season series against them last year. But it's those games are going to be sellouts. Just everyone wanting to come in and see those guys.
Yeah, no, it'll be nice. It'll be nice to start the season off that way, and I do like the idea of maybe getting the opportunity to play them early in the season. While they're still potentially trying to figure some stuff out. But it's you're gonna get you get 6 out of the first 9 at home before you go on the road and play 3 in Atlanta and 3 in St. Louis. But it's I'm curious to see how this season starts to play out, because you have the opportunity to be able to get like you said, get a couple series wins under your belt. Before you go into that Dodger series. And the more that you can establish yourself as, and try to, create a scenario where you can go back to back and win the division again. You're going to need to be able to win those battles against what will be a healthier Braves team.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Have you seen, I'm sure you've seen, I don't have to tell you, have you seen the hats?
Yes.
The new era hats that have been discontinued. They took them off the shelves because of, I just, Eric, this is the kind of stuff that like I don't understand. Who saw that and said, yeah, that's a go? Who saw that and didn't see that it says ass? Or that it I mean, I just cursed, but like the Texas Rangers hat is Spanish. When in the Spanish translation,
yes,
it translates to a female body part. So
yes, anatomy.
The Angels, like
there's an extra letter in there, but it's still funny.
Yeah, who, why, how, and now because they got taken off the shelves, they're selling on eBay for like an insane amount of money, like $1,000. How does this happen?
People are just dumb. I mean, you look at those hats.
This had to go through like multiple people, right. This wasn't just like some guy going, oh yeah, we're just gonna put a whole new line of hats out. Like, this went through like a whole pile of iterations of people to say like, oh yeah, we approve it, and then it took the internet about 4 minutes.
Yes, because I saw the original tweet of them coming out and like they're all the teams in the line, and I'm like scrolling through. I'm like, some of them I did a double take with. I'm like, what?
The Fippies, it was like
Yeah,
I just I don't know. It
yeah.
just
None
it's
of them were really good, but some were comical compared to others.
all right. I got the next fun video. Did you see one of the guys from the Cubs taking BP with a sword?
I did not see this.
All right, here we go. I'm gonna highlight it, spotlight it here. He's taking BP. Say Suzuki, and he's actually cutting the ball in half.
Wow. Wow.
Like to the point where it hits the guy that's filming it. But like,
Wow.
I like one, kudos to you for thinking about that. But two, wildly impressive to see somebody taking BP with a samurai sword.
Yeah, for how thin that thing is, that like that hand-eye coordination is impressive.
Something really crazy. Well, Eric, we're gonna hop off on something Phillies related.
Let's do it.
Jimmy Rollins going into the Toyota Wall of Fame on Saturday, August 1st. Him and Ed Wade.
I love it.
It's the first of really, I will say, our generation of that players from that 2008 team. And I think that really will start a parade of, the Ryan Howards and the Chase Utleys and the Cole Hamels, that whole crew.
Yeah, I think I was wondering who the first one was going to be. I wasn't sure if they're going to do Jimmy or Chase first. But you're right. I think this is just going to start. And I think after you do Jimmy this year, I think the next 4 years we're going to see those exact guys that you just mentioned. I don't know what order we'll see them in, but you have to put them in there. They're some of those guys you can maybe argue. I've seen arguments. I don't know. I don't necessarily have a stance on it, but their numbers even retired at some point. And the Ed Wade one I think is good too. So Ed Wade basically got run out of town, right? He was not very popular at the conclusion of his tenure here, but without Ed Wade, that 2008 does not happen. He basically
really
brought in
doesn't.
all of those guys. So he was maybe not, he wasn't necessarily great in bringing in personnel, but also you didn't have the ownership group that we have now that was willing to go out and spend, like Middleton is. So by, he kind of kickstarted everything, right? He brought in Jim Thome, which kind of then set the tone for, hey, the Phillies are like going to get back to being serious here. But he also brought in all those, the draft picks and prospects with Rollins, Utley, Burrell, Howard, all those guys. So,
yeah, and listen, I think I love the fact that they're starting to bring those guys back around a lot more, right? You saw the Cole Hamels is now going to be part of the broadcast crew in a limited availability, right? I can't remember how is it. Do you remember what?
I kind of forget what it was, but he's done the last. He did well, it wasn't yesterday, but he did Thursday, and he did the spring breakout game on Friday with McCarthy. So,
but like, you have them around a little bit. You saw the photos going around of the three of them between Rollins, Howard and Hamels in spring training. The interview with Jimmy, basically saying like, if you want people to stop talking about 08, go win one. Right.
Yep.
The message to Harper. I think it might not be a bad idea to have those guys around.
That's great.
To really kind of put maybe that is the message that this team needs to hear, because they've been for the last 3 years, they've been sniffing the playoffs in turn, but their progression is going backwards, right? They went from the World Series to the NLCS now to a first series exit. It's you're going to need something to kind of put them back into a different trajectory. So I like the idea of the influx of those guys. Eric, any final thoughts as we the next time we talk, Eric? We will have games to break down.
We'll have actual games.
We will have actual games. We'll have we'll have at least the first 2 games against the Nationals to break down, and we'll kind of preview the afternoon slate for the game in Washington. But any final thoughts on the way out?
Did you get to see Schwarber playing first base the other night against the Yankees?
You mean the Gold Glove?
Yeah.
The play there? That was,
Yeah.
like, do you think is that a legit thing?
I don't think so. I mean,
just,
I'm still very skeptical, but he actually, like, I was expecting. I mean, there was the one where he bobbled and recovered and everything, and afterwards he was smiling and he was laughing with his pitcher and everything. I like in a pinch, maybe if you had to, he could maybe, but I don't want to see it. But
gotcha.
especially when you have Bohm who could play first. JT's played first in the past. Like, I would trust either of those guys doing it before Schwarber. But he looked more viable than I thought. But if he has to play more than like 5 games out there, no.
Yeah, it would take a very unique set of circumstances for that to happen, for that lineup combination to happen. So
yeah,
I hope not, but
yeah,
it just kind of is what it is. But listen, on our way out, go Phils.
Go Phils.
Hey, listen to this guy. Tell me how you're feeling here. You're screaming.
I am stoked, baby.
You're screaming like it's still the game going on.
We're talking about the fightings here. The fightings. Said.